Hi again, this is Jeff Harmon with Brilliance Within, back with another episode of conversations that life science leaders aren't having. Today's a really cool conversation with Adam Walker. Adam is a biometrics subject matter expert in the life science space. He has almost 25 years doing this good work. He's also a podcaster, a mentor to many, and an advocate around mental health. And as I've gotten to know Adam, who he is to me is connection and authenticity. And I think that will come through loud and clear in this conversation. We go deep really quick, and I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Adam. It is so exciting to have you. And so I know we're going to dive into some cool topics today. Where I'd love to start, as we do with all of our guests, is to share something out of your life that most people wouldn't be able to know or find out from the standard Google search or the LinkedIn profile.
Well, firstly, Jeff, I wanted to thank you for having me on your podcast, because I know we've spoken extensively in the past and you and I have connected on many different levels. So that's what I wanted to say in the first instance. But I think, just to follow on from your question, really, things that people wouldn't know necessarily about me around my LinkedIn profile. I talk about the 3 H's, and that's hero, hardship, and highlights. For me in life, my hero is my mother. And she spent the last 13 years looking after my father, who had a quite catastrophic stroke some time ago, and she has been his primary carer since then. And every day that goes by, I think about her and I talk to her and I go and see them as much as I can. I live only a couple of miles away from them. She's my hero, and everything that I do for my own family, for my wife and my 2 children, is driven by the example that she sets me every single day, and my parents have set me all the way through my life. Concerning hardships, I haven't really had that many hardships in my life. You know, I'm very fortunate. I've come from a really good background. I've been well educated, and I haven't wanted for too much. But the time in my life when I had the least and was the most happy, and was with my wife when she was my girlfriend, was when we spent 9 months on kibbutz in Israel. And this was in 1996. We had literally not a bean to our name. We only had enough money to get our flights to Israel, and we were collected when we got there by the kibbutzniks, and we were taken to a kibbutz on one of the many mountains in Jerusalem. And we spent 9 months there, living a very basic existence, working for our food and our accommodation. And the highlight for me over the last couple of years has really been participating in an incredible industry. The life science industry and clinical research right now has never been more exciting, more interesting, and more challenging. And I have had some unbelievable opportunities over the last couple of years, none of which I took for granted. And as we went into the pandemic, I actually expected things to become very quiet for me. And that's not been my experience at all. It's been quite the opposite. Pivoting and getting involved in podcasts and finding my voice has been really transformational for me. So in a roundabout way, I hope that answers the question you have, and for our listeners, perhaps share something a little bit more about the me.
Yeah, I love that. And what I'm getting in all of that is it really comes in all 3 in different ways. It comes down to some really core things. Like it gets down to almost the essence of life. With your mom, health, well, your mom and dad, health and love. With your hardship, with having nothing, just, the shirt on your back and a person you love. And then even your work, just connecting to it in a different way of impact and contribution. It just feels like in all 3 differently, but all 3 come down to some very, very core things that my sense that really ground you.
Yeah, I'm extremely grounded. I take very little, if anything, for granted. And you're absolutely right. There is a common thread that runs through all of that. And as we've discussed several times before, I do go deep very quickly, and that's exactly what we've done today already, isn't it? You know, we've literally peeled back the layers and we've gone straight in there, and that's where I'm most comfortable, to be honest. You know, the passion in all aspects of my life and that consistency through personal and professional is really so important and so core to my values. I can't describe it any better than that, than just to say that it's really important that both internal and external facing is the same and is consistent, and I align with myself, and I can look myself in the mirror every day and be proud of what I'm achieving personally, professionally, and for my family.
Yeah, and it brings me to the title of this podcast is Conversations that Life Science Leaders Aren't Having, and you pointed to going deep and going deep quickly. And one thing I hear less often than I used to, but still hear is, especially in the life sciences, that things are moving so fast and things are happening so quickly and the demands are so great that going deep is put on the sidelines. It's not that people don't care, but going deep and really connecting has, in some ways, has been put to the sidelines because we have things to do. We're really busy. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, where is the place in this high pressure, fast paced industry? What is the place, or where is the place for deeper connection?
I think it's a terrific question you asked. And deep connection, let's make no bones about it. Okay, we're all busy, but people have always been busy. Okay, and we've got tools and we've got technology that supports that busyness. But actually, is there something tangible at the end of it? In other words, we can all pedal really hard and we can all work up a sweat, but ultimately, if we're not showing something tangible for our outcomes, it's just pedaling hard for the sake of it. And what I've realized in the last couple of years, more than anything else, is actually that we have an awful lot more time at our disposal than we ever had before, because we're so productive, because we don't spend time necessarily commuting to and from work every day like we used to. Case in point, you know, I'm sat in the bottom of my garden. 2 years ago, I didn't have a garden office. I've got one now. This is where I do my best work. Podcasting, working. This is the place where I absolutely ground myself in my best possible headspace. And so to have that space and place where I can do my best work, it actually not just acts as an enabler, but really I've identified that I have more time and options to connect with people than I ever did before, because an 8-hour working day today is very different to how it was 2 or 3 years ago. Let's make no bones about it. I don't have those water cooler moments anymore. If I've got work to do, I get it done. I don't have the distractions that I once had. And, you know, I'm fortunate my kids are a little bit older now, so they don't need me necessarily to be there every second of every day to pick them up, to drop them off, play dates and all those types of things. So I have more capacity and I'm smarter with the time. And that's really ultimately what it comes down to. So, you know, I would never hide behind that, oh gosh, I'm really busy. It's just, I think I'm quite productive. And if I set myself a personal goal, I'll deliver it.
And if you have a very unique perspective, in my estimation, 16 or so years inside companies as an employee, now almost the last decade as a consultant, still working inside companies, but in a different capacity.
Yes.
As it relates to this whole notion of connection, authentic connection with other humans. If you could whisper in the ear of CEOs and leaders in organizations around authentic connection, what would you say to them? What advice or what direction? Again, bird on their shoulder, angel on the shoulder, whatever metaphor you want to use. Yeah. What would you whisper to them? What direction would you give them?
I've seen it firsthand, as you say, from the outside in and from the inside out. And the things that I am seeing these days within many of the organizations I've supported have really been that there is more capability than we are aware of. But also, if you invest in those people and you get to know them and you take the time to really get under the skin of individuals, you will absolutely gain an understanding, but also a commitment from those people that you would never otherwise untap. And I see that regularly now in my day-to-day engagements with various clients, as I say. Now, many companies, particularly large companies, have very grand ideas and principles, but actually when you get under the skin of them and you see how people are interacting day to day in an office setting, what you see and what you hear are very different to necessarily what they want the external view to be. And I think back to the point that you made about outside in, inside out, I have managed and been responsible for large teams. I've recruited people into those large teams, and I've trained them and given them lots of guidance and teaching and mentoring to enable them to do the best work that they can possibly do within, under my umbrella, if you like. Translating that now into a larger organization where I am that small cog in a big chain, I have influence, but I don't necessarily have ultimate decision making. So I work in high performing teams and I work alongside exceedingly highly qualified people who impress me every single day. There is a but, and the but is there is more that these people are capable of that they haven't unlocked. And that's really, this is where I'm coming to, that really, by engaging with those staff, you can untap that talent. You can really coalesce something special out of these teams. And that's not what I'm seeing right now. Sometimes I feel an urgency to actually just take off the blinkers and go into a room and just say, whoa, let's just rip that idea up and throw it all out, start all over again and whiteboard it and get up with some reality, some real conversations. And I try and lead by example in the teams that I'm working with. I make very strong connections very quickly. And I also make promises and deliver on those promises. And that's what I expect in the people that I'm working alongside. And I've always expected, whether I've been leading them, responsible for the financial accountabilities, deliverables, whatever it is, it's always that. So I take that with me as a consultant into these large organizations and act effectively as my own business developer, because I try and demonstrate that professionalism in everything I do, give my very utmost and my best, and leave something better than I found it, always.
Do you think, you talked about this untapped capability or potential? I have my own opinion on this that I can share in a second, but I'm curious, is it a choice that people are making to hold back? Is it they don't even know they have the capability and this potential? Or is it both? Maybe it's both. What's your sense of things?
It's definitely both. And I'll tell you where it comes from for me. Okay. Having been on the receiving end of unpleasant things that have happened in a workplace. I've been made redundant on several occasions. I've had mental health challenges over the years, which I'm very open and honest about and have defined me in themselves. What I recognize is that salaried people generally seem to just turn up every day and expect their paycheck at the end of the month. Now, that doesn't work for me because every day I turn up, I have to demonstrate value every single day and do. So that when it comes to the end of the month and I invoice that client, they know what I've done for them for that entire month. And I can absolutely attest to what I'm invoicing them for is what they're paying me for. is a very different mindset when you're salaried. And I see this in friends and colleagues because, as I say, that untapped talent and that untapped pool and reserve goes over and above and beyond that standard working day. It's the thinking when you're not working. It's the never putting your pen down and stopping making a list at the end of the day. And it's starting a day afresh with a fresh list of actions and outcomes and ticking them off at the end of every day. I love making lists. I'm very goal orientated. That's just the person I am. I've always been that way. And that's what works for me. Whether or not I was salaried or not, I can tell you categorically that my mindset is entirely different now. And I don't know how you put that into individuals and give them that sense of urgency when they are salaried, because they feel comfortable. I haven't felt comfortable for 10 years. As you said, when you're working for yourself, it's down to you. You're your business developer. You're the one that gets yourself up in the morning. You have to motivate yourself. You don't get paid if you don't work, and you certainly don't get paid if you're sick or you just don't feel like it. I don't have that luxury. So there's no comfy chair for me. Yeah. And people in comfy chairs behave like they're in comfy chairs. They talk like they're in comfy chairs. And therefore, the discussions they have come back to that same thing again. They're comfortable conversations. They're not challenging conversations. They're not the so whats. They're just a different level of conversation.
So what's it? I always put this all at, yes, there is personal responsibility of the person that finds himself in the comfy chair. But I put this squarely at the feet of that person's leader or leaders. What's incumbent upon that leader, given the person who feels comfortable in their chair? What's incumbent upon them to tap into that potential, that capacity that maybe they're not volunteering, they're not bringing that? What is the leader's responsibility in that?
It's really tricky, because effectively what I'm asking for people is to have an entrepreneur's mindset and a risk taker's mindset when everything in their control is the opposite of that. So you don't want people necessarily to feel uncomfortable at work, but there should be a little bit of challenge to the status quo, to the day-to-day. Show me what you're doing, but also demonstrate it and challenge yourself. Take responsibility, as you say, be accountable, but also be an advocate for yourself and the team that you're representing. And, I come back to that same point, which is that it's almost looking in from the outside of a goldfish bowl sometimes for me. It's so obvious. And I didn't see that in my old life because I was on the other side of the fence. And I always worked hard and I always delivered. But it felt different. It feels very different now. And that wisdom and the learning and the discomfort that I've experienced so much is the thing that has given me those kind of tools and that armory where I know not just my value, but also I'm confident in my value. I didn't always have that. When I was at rock bottom, I had no confidence in my value. I didn't think I would work in this industry again. And, when you've been at that bottom point, obviously the only way is up. But at the same time, you've got to find a set of skills and tools that are going to enable you to really translate that passion and drive into action and value.
So can I share my theory or hypothesis on this?
Please, I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
So my belief here is that employees and consultants, for that matter, no matter where they sit, are largely volunteers. So they're paid for a certain measure of, I call it, they're paid for the tips of their fingers on the keyboard. They're paid for part of their brains. They're paid for a little bit of their hearts. That's what they're paid for. If they're doing manual labor, their feet, their backs. But every other part, the rest of their brain, the energy, the commitment, the risk taking that you're pointing to can only be volunteered.
Yes.
It can only be volunteered. So they'll get paid, even for a consultant. That person will get paid, and for rightfully so, for what they are engaged to give. The rest of it is completely voluntary. And so again, I come back to the statement that the worker, whatever level in the organization, from CEO on down, has a level of personal responsibility. But that whole part, that all that discretionary stuff, let's call it, those discretionary resources, I come back to my assertion that is at the feet of a leader to be. And I think this is where we come back to authentic connection can play a role. It's incumbent upon the leader, both them personally and then the culture that they create, to draw out all those discretionary resources. I'd love your reaction to that.
Well, I think I agree with that to a point, and we come back to personal responsibility and accountability. And I can't put it any clearer, other than to say, we have capacity and we have capability. How much we commit to our job is obviously down to the individual. And I know plenty of people who talk about work all the time outside of work, and it absolutely takes over their waking hours. I'm not that person, so I can just do the role and leave it at the end of the working day and leave it somewhere else. I don't need to take it home with me. So that capacity, taking it home with you actually burns your motivation, so that you wake up the next day feeling like you're already in it, because you've been thinking about it all the time. You've slept and you've made lists about it, and you've talked to your partner about it and your friends, and you've gone out for a beer and telling everyone else about it, but you're never switching off. And so I think there is a physical distance and an emotional distance that you need to kind of compartmentalize. And again, this is something that I've learned through consulting extensively, is that you can't let that thread run all the way through your entire day. I can't. And that's why I build into my day plenty of time to decompress, to distance myself from the working day, whether it be walking my dogs, talking to my wife, walking with the kids, getting fresh air, being outside in nature, and getting away from the technology. And whether that's, switching your phones off at night, making sure that you're engaged with your family, sitting around a dinner table of an evening, that's really important. The grounding around your working day. It's a working day, okay? You don't need it to absolutely overtake all aspects of your life. It doesn't make you better at your job. That's what I want to say. It doesn't make me better at my job when I'm thinking about it all the time. And then you show up and you're your best version. If you are able to get, decent rest, decent sleep, eat well, rest well, and have good communications and good relationships outside of your working setting, because those are the things that ground me. And I think for most people, they would find a similar outcome, if they were to do that. So
it brings up a whole, I love, it just brings up a whole other question of why people operate in a hustle and grind mindset, where the thread of work runs through every fabric of their being, every moment of their life. And I'm wondering, what's the conversation that we should be having around why they're doing that?
The example I was referring to was actually my wife. So she, up until 6 months ago, was a high school teacher, and she's passionate about her subject, which is geography. And she was working in that industry, and very successfully for the last 10 or 11 years after we'd had children, and she requalified as a teacher. She'd previously worked in clinical research, funnily enough, alongside myself. That wasn't how we met. We met at school. That's a whole nother story. The fact is, she followed her passion. She requalified as a teacher. She taught geography. And every single day she went to bed, she had a list by the bedside, and she couldn't switch off from it. And it absolutely overtook every waking moment of her capacity. She was only a part-time, 4-day-a-week teacher. But for the other 3 days of the week, she couldn't think about anything else. It was lesson planning, it was seat plans, which child needed special differentiation in the classes, how she was going to get this particular message across, news flashes from the TV or the radio that were relevant. You know, what's the latest volcanic ash cloud, hurricane, natural disaster that's happened? How can I bring it into a classroom setting and enthuse the students? And that's my personal experience of having seen this in my wife so deeply. And the ultimate sacrifice that she gave, which was ultimately to have to walk away from that profession because it just emptied her. She had nothing left. And so for the last 6 months or so, she's been recovering from that work setting where she is absolutely passionate about her subject, but actually the teaching became less than 10% of the time that she was spending doing the thing that got her out of bed in the morning. And it was at such a human and personal cost to her, to us as a family, to every aspect of her life, that ultimately she made that decision that she had to walk away. And I supported her, and I support her in that decision because I saw the human cost of that. So, this is personal experience. And I'm not saying I've got it sorted. I'm not saying she's got it sorted. But what I do know is that she has an amazing capacity, mental capacity, and passion for her subject. And if someone like her can't succeed in teaching with all of those skills and with all those transferable skills that she learned from clinical research and being a mother and being a parent and all the things that make her great at what she does, oh my goodness me, where does that leave us?
Yeah, you use the word. She hasn't taken these 6 months off.
No,
you specifically use the word. She's been in recovery, and I don't do these type of statistics or do this type of research. It's all anecdotal, but I'm wondering how many people, how many employees, life science or education or whatever the industry, could use whatever that length of time is, 6 months, 3 months, a year of real recovery.
Everyone could. Now, I'm going to tell you what she's done in that period of recovery as well. And that's why I call it recovery. She's actually written her story. She's written a book in that time. It was started as a diary, and it's become a reflective document and book that she's going to publish. She's going to write it, and she's going to tell her story. And it's called The Truth Behind Teaching. And she writes brilliantly. She also has taught English in the past. She's not qualified as an English graduate or anything, but she writes absolutely brilliantly. She writes beautiful poetry. I sound like I'm selling her, don't I? Her name is B, by the way, and she'll love listening back to this, I'm sure. But anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is because I think we can all learn from this experience. And really, the point we're talking about is if a role and a job is that much, that it takes that much from you, that you need a 6-month sabbatical to reflect and question why you've done what you're doing and how you're going to navigate the rest of your life, career, whatever that might be. What does that say? Because I also took a period of time out of work when I was very unwell, as I mentioned. I didn't work for over a year. Didn't think I'd ever get back into this industry. And that was when I did my best reflection and my best recovery. I spent lots of time analyzing myself, having various different group therapies, one-on-one therapy sessions. And that's when I learned the most about myself that I've ever learned. And that has transformed me ever after. So these aren't skills that we learn at school. We're not taught these in high school. We're not taught them in primary school. And unless you have someone very close to you who's had that personal experience and you've seen it firsthand, and they've described it to you and been open and honest with you, you don't know these things. You know, you can find them in books, but actually there's nothing like having a personal story and the real human behind that. And that's where I find myself right now. I think it's a tragedy for the teaching profession. This isn't about her, I know, but this is a tragedy for the teaching profession that so many highly qualified people over the last couple of years have had to walk away from education because the demands on them have become so enormous. Doesn't matter where we're talking, UK, Europe, US, Asia Pacific, it's the same the world over. We've all experienced burnout like never before in the last couple of years. Because as I said to you, our capacity is so much larger than it's ever been. And as a teacher, passionate about your subject, or as a subject matter expert in biometrics, do you know what? You can do as much as you want to do, because you can work round the clock if you want to. It's down to you, but it comes at a human cost.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I know I said the phrase. I put this at the feet of leaders, but so that I think that's unfair to an extent. But the managers and bosses, supervisors, CEOs, those that are leading people, I think there's what I would call it is not a responsibility, but an opportunity. There is a tinge of responsibility, but such an opportunity to be able to see into the lives of the people that they're leading, that spend more than 50% of their waking hours in that environment with that person. There's such an opportunity to be able to connect and to really be a resource, not a mental health professional, but just be a resource of authentic connection that can help notice and see what is really happening with this person.
Some people don't have those skills. I think these are things that you and I probably take for granted. We're empathetic individuals. We have a deep, rich vein of compassion running through us. I know you have it. I've never physically met you, but I know you have it, and I have it. And compassion doesn't come easy to some people. They see it as a weakness. They see it as a sign of external weakness if they show compassion and they show empathy. For me, it's a strength. I see it as a strength. And when I come into contact with people who share that similar level of depth, I see that as a shining strength. And in certain industries, it doesn't work that way. I can say these things quite happily because ultimately I'm in charge of my own destiny. I know we all are, but I actually know I'm in charge of my own destiny because that's the name of my company. It's my name over the door. It's no one else's name over the door. So I can say these things with confidence, knowing that there will be no repercussions, negative or positive. It's just what it is.
Yeah. There's just, I know for me, I'm a patient. I'm literally a patient of the life science space, given my story. And I think that's part of the reason I do what I do. And I think there's a strong thread of that for you is we see so much more as possible to help patients, and that the people who are part of this process, as the scientists, as the data analysts, as the quality engineers, and so on and so on and so on and so forth, that there's just so much that can be accomplished without sacrificing life, without sacrificing the humanity of the people who are charged with accomplishing that.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, as you say, we're all patients, and that's absolutely correct. As I say, I've had medication over the years, antidepressants, various other things that have kept me alive, kept me sane, kept me healthy. I haven't been on any medication for 7+ years. It's also been the thing that's kept my father alive and has helped his recovery. And all around us, as we've experienced in the last 2 or 3 years, we've been living through the greatest clinical trial that there's ever been. So medicine and medical information and medical terminologies are everywhere in the public domain. There has never been a time like it. And it's so uplifting to remind ourselves on a daily basis, whether patient, participant, or someone supporting the clinical research industry, that we have a part to play, all of us. It's absolutely pivotal to what we do.
Yeah, and just coming back to this, and it's all driven by humans.
Yes.
I named a few of those roles, whether quality engineer, data scientist, bench scientist, but it is all, this is a human, and I say this when I get a chance to stand in front of an audience or work with a group of leaders, is this is a human proposition. This is all driven by other humans. And it is so critical that we really get this. This isn't just shuffling paper. This isn't just moving widgets. We are tapping into human possibility to create even more human possibility as it relates to the therapies and the drugs and the treatments that these folks are developing.
I mean, we're fortunate that there has never been a better time to be alive if we want to live long, sustained, and healthy lives. The fact is, in days gone by, at the age of nearly 50, I'd be an old man. I'd be considered an old man. And I don't feel like an old man. Sometimes my body lets me feel like I'm an old man, but genuinely, healthcare and food and nutrition and the awareness with which we approach our lives now is so different to how it was only 100 years ago. And if you think about the Industrial Revolution and what's transformed in the last few hundred years about this conversation today, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We couldn't have this conversation. In the days of only dial-up broadband, this would have been a challenge as well, wouldn't it? It's like we're just around the corner. I feel like I'm just around the corner. Yeah. And that in itself is absolutely wonderful because we have so many great tools at our disposal, the ability to make connections with people in completely disparate places that we would never, ever have come into contact with before. We don't need to get on planes anymore. We don't need to do the things that we once did. So we can be so much more productive and proactive about the choices that we make. And I think that's exactly why we are talking today, for that reason.
Yeah. It's brilliant. And I agree with you. It is an extraordinary time to be alive. There's extraordinary challenges.
Yes.
And it is an extraordinary gift and an extraordinary time to be alive. As we wrap up today, Adam, I want to give you that one more chance to be the voice to executives, CEOs, and leaders on if you only had a moment of time to give them a piece of advice or direction on how they lead going forward, what would be that piece of advice or that direction you would give them?
There's several. I mean, I listen to podcasts and I read books on self-improvement all the time. One that resonates really loudly with me is a book called Legacy by James Kerr. And he talks about the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team. And they are considered to be what he calls the most winningest team in history. In other words, they have the highest percentage wins of any club team in any sport in the world. And what they speak about doing is always leaving the shirt in a better place than you found it, that you're only ever looking after that shirt. It's never yours. So you might be wearing a number on your back, but ultimately it's your responsibility to leave it in a better place than you found it. And the other principle that they always adhere to is at the end of every game and every match, when they're back in their changing rooms, they call them the sheds. Sweep the sheds. Make sure you leave the sheds better than you found them. And so, even after they won back-to-back World Cups, their captain was sweeping the sheds before he went out and received the trophy. Now, that is ultimate humility, ultimate accountability and responsibility, and setting the very highest standards for those that then come after you. And that's what we talk about in Legacy, and that's what he talks about in Legacy. It's a transformative book, and I took so much from it. I'm a passionate rugby fan, as you might gather, and the principles that it talks through are so powerful, and I would recommend it to any one of your listeners, because it just gave me a totally different perspective. And my son plays a lot of rugby, and I'm around rugby a lot, and I see great behaviors. But when I see the world champions, I understand what gets those individuals out of bed every morning and why they behave in the manner that they do, and why I've got pictures of them with my son. They're quite happy to take selfies at pitch side. They walk around the pitch at the end. They shake the hands of the people who've paid their fees to watch those games, to buy the tickets. They don't consider themselves to be above anyone in that stadium. They're absolutely there as fans as much as they are players.
I love that. I love that as a gift to these leaders and executives in life science, that you're having a chance in this moment to speak into their lives, and hopefully they'll pick up the book. If not, just those two principles: leave the shirt better than the way you left it, and leave the shed clean and better than when you were there, I think are just so powerful. And combined with everything else we've talked about today is brilliant. What if folks want to get to know you a little bit better, Adam? Where should they look? How can they find you?
So they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Adam Walker on LinkedIn. Interestingly, there are a number of other Adam Walkers I've discovered over the past few years. There's an Adam Walker that swims the oceans. He swam the Atlantic Ocean. I like him. I'm not him, unfortunately. There are a couple of other Adam Walkers, but I'd like to think that there is only one like me that does the work that I do with the principles and the values that I follow. And I just want to thank you for taking the time today, Jeff, to listen to me, to hear my musings, and give me the opportunity and a platform to spread those positive thoughts and energies with your audience as well. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's a gift, and we could have gone on for another hour, and maybe there'll be a groundswell for part 2 of this conversation. But
I'd love that.
Let's make it the next time we do this. Let's do it where we're seated side by side.
I'd like that even more,
instead of across the ocean. So, Adam, what a gift, and thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jeff.